Hello everyone, I'm the introverted astrologer and I'm delighted to be back with you today. I do welcome any new subscribers and hope that all of you are well wherever you are. The American political scene is changing so rapidly, and so today I'm bringing you a short video which takes a look at J.D. Vance. Trump has just announced that J.D. will be his running mate, and we do have a birthday. Can I please shout out to any of you who may be aware of a birth time, because that would help me immensely. But just on the basis of that birthday, we can find out a lot. And so this is what we'll be looking at now. Can we see the promise of imminent success and promotion in JD's chart? What are his transits like? Are there any fundamental shifts happening in his underlying progressions? And so we'll go to the computer now and have a look at those. So here we have the noon chart for JD. Please do disregard any angles or houses because they are almost certainly inaccurate. And we have the Placidus chart on the left side of the screen, and the whole sign version is on the right. We can start delineating this chart just by taking a swift look at the distribution of planets. We can see that they are all placed in roughly 1/2 of the chart, leaving it with a bowl shape, so that we're basically looking at somebody who is very highly focused, and they will concentrate their activity on things which they find personally meaningful and highly relevant. And there will also be a sense of self-containment with this person. What kind of signature do they have? We can see that a predominance of these planets are placed in fixed signs, far more than we have in cardinal or mutable signs. And similarly, we have a predominance of fire energy. And so the overall signature is a fixed fire, which is Leo. And that doubly reinforces those Leo placements that JD already has. On looking closer, we can see that some of these planets are very much at home in the signs that they rule anyway. That includes the Sun, which of course is the ruler of Leo, but we also have Mercury in Virgo. Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio too, and so these planets will find it easier to express their energy. There is one planet which is placed in its fall, and that is Jupiter, which is in Capricorn, and we'll come to that soon. The Sun and Mars are the ultimate dispositors of all the planets in this chart. And so we're already building that sense of somebody who is inspired by actions. They're fiery. There's potentially a good deal of passion, of creative energy and inspiration. If we look at this Leo Sun, we can see that it is in one of the tightest aspects in this chart, and that is the square to Saturn. Let's consider the basic principles that are being brought into conflict here. That fiery Sun in Leo will be motivated by its inspirations. Fire is quite an excitable energy, and Leos can be very warm and vital people. They enjoy drama and largesse, and they need to shine. They need that recognition. Yet Saturn places limits and restrictions on this solar energy, and it can make us feel very aware of our limitations. So underneath that fiery exterior, we will be very much aware of our shortcomings, our faults. We could feel inadequate and even defensive. This is an aspect which can improve with time and experience, and it can also show somebody who is prepared to work extremely hard. Because deep down we don't always feel worthy, we can be very hard on ourselves and carry a chip on our shoulders. Now Saturn is in the sign of Scorpio, so we have a very strong, passionate energy here. Because it is Saturn, we could be very defensive around the area of our emotions and very secretive. And so there may be issues with expressing or acknowledging deeper emotions running within us. So any of these emotions around inadequacy or low self-esteem may be held back, may be kept very private indeed. And there is probably a very strong need for emotional control, for self-reliance, and very high levels of self-discipline. That sun also has a trine with Uranus, which lends an unconventional quality to JD. Uranus energy brings with it an urge for excitement, for stimulation, for freedom and change. And so there will also be a slightly unpredictable edge to JD. We can also pick out a sextile between the Sun and Chiron. And even with that less stressful aspect, the sextile, we could still anticipate some level of wounding to the solar principle. In some way, Vance will have needed to adapt or conform to a certain way of being, which has meant that he cannot truly shine for himself, but has had to accommodate a modification of his solar energy in order to help heal or serve a wider purpose for others. And one of the things that we can indeed see in the declinations is that the Sun and Chiron are closely parallel to each other, reinforcing this Sun-Chiron contact in the longitudes. The Magi Society place huge emphasis on Chiron, and their interpretation of this would indicate somebody extremely charismatic or noteworthy for some reason. How about the moon? The noon position of it is around 21 degrees of Libra, and we know that it will be in Libra regardless of what time of day JD is born. An interesting question is whether it would actually be in a conjunction with that Pluto too. But on the face of it, Libra is air energy, and so JD is probably blessed with a certain amount of objectivity and the ability to think before he speaks. He would be able to see the other person's point of view and to seek out balance and harmony in his relationships. Libra moons don't tend to cope with their own company for too long, because the security that they seek out is found in their closer relationships with other people. The moon ruler is Venus, which is also placed in Leo. So we can again see that need for recognition. We can be very warm and affectionate, we can be generous and enthusiastic, but our need for attention might sometimes get in the way of our relationships. And another one of the very close aspects in this chart involves a square between Venus and Mars. So if we come down now to Mars, to this Scorpio emphasis, it's interesting that both the malefics, Saturn and Mars, are placed in Scorpio. This is something that we could see in the charts of quite a few members of the Kennedy family. So we also have that association with the darker and more intense side of life, including issues like transformation, death, rebirth, passion, and intensity. With this Mars, we would expect a great deal of endurance. There is likely again that need for self-protection. We could be quite secretive at times and possibly controlling. This square between Mars and Venus repeats the themes of strong passion, but with it there could probably also come a certain amount of impatience and irritability. We may also be a little selfish and controlling, and this could cause conflict in our relationships from time to time. The Mercury in this chart is very interesting. It's a strong Mercury, very aware of the fine detail, very logical and discriminating. This link to Saturn speaks of great mental staying power. We have self-discipline and structure with our mental processes. So we can consider that JD's ability to think and to speak is very well developed. There's probably a very good memory with a systematic and self-disciplined approach, and the trine between Jupiter and that Mercury would widen the boundaries of his mind and allow for a broad range of interests and a natural curiosity. He would probably make an excellent teacher or mentor as well. Yet Chiron is involved in this too, and Chiron is in the other sign that is ruled by Mercury. So there is some kind of wound in the area of Gemini. Gemini covers our speech, our thought processes and communications. It could say something about our early education. But there has been a wounding to Mercury for some reason, potentially something that has led to feelings of shame and inadequacy in these areas. because Uranus is involved too. It could be that there is something about us, something unusual about our mind or intellect, where we feel less than or different. Having this involvement of Uranus could indicate that there is an overquickness with our written or verbal communications. We could be too quick off the mark and go to extremes at times, and this then arouses those feelings of inadequacy or shame. Perhaps there is something unusual about our mind or our intellect, for example, a processing difficulty, but nonetheless there is possibly something about this which is not mainstream and which is not probably suited to mainstream education, so to speak. Now, the Jupiter in this chart is one that seeks out advancement and personal betterment, and this theme is repeated with that sextile between Pluto and Jupiter. This advancement is likely to be of quite a materialistic and conservative nature, so we would be very aware, for example, of climbing the career ladder, of the social strata that exist in society. Jupiter is said to fall in Capricorn because Capricorn's structures, including authority, order, self-discipline, tradition, can dampen Jupiter's natural expansive qualities. And now we're moving on to look at the current picture. When people have a major change in their lives, we can always expect to find corresponding activity in the planets or angles if we apply a few of our forecasting techniques. It's very sad that we're limited by a lack of birth time. This means we can't calculate where the ascendant and the midheaven are. Those are the very sensitive parts of our birth charts, and these are almost always involved at times of change. So we are missing a big part of this picture. I was hoping that we would be able to pick up something from the transits, but incredibly, there's almost nothing. But we can see that JD is having a couple of generational transits, and one of those is Neptune. Neptune, moving through the last part of Pisces, has begun making a square aspect with its natal position. This is a generational transit, and it's one that we all go through at some point in our very late 30s or early 40s. JD's is just starting. It first became exact in May of this year, and it will be ongoing throughout 2025 too. So this isn't really a transit that we would associate with making well thought out changes to our life direction. Sometimes we can end up pursuing things that come to nothing at all. Our vision is probably quite distorted under this influence. Neptune is of course associated with dreams, with pursuing dreams, but it's also associated with illusion and delusion, and its vibrational energies tend to break things down, to dissolve boundaries and structures. We might find ourselves questioning how far we have come and what we've achieved, and these things are going to be put to the test over a year or so. How we perceive ourselves, what we believe our needs in life are, these things will all be in a state of flux during this transit, and it may not be until Neptune is well out of the way that we become aware of what was real and what was not. And I think we can concede this lack of clarity does not necessarily bode well for making major decisions like JD has recently made. But let's see if there are any other helpful transits that will offset this destabilising influence. Now, it's very likely that transiting Jupiter, which is now moving through the sign of Gemini, is forming a sextile aspect with JD's Sun. The first contact was probably in February of this year, and the last time that it will be in orb is February of next year. But the next few months are when JD could really do with some Jupiter influence, and Jupiter won't be in orb then, and neither will it be around the area of a sextile to his Sun come election time. Jupiter may well be forming a trine aspect with JD's Moon. This isn't necessarily a transit that we would associate with a great deal of action as such, but we could attract favourable circumstances to ourselves. More than anything though, we would associate this transit with feelings of warmth and generosity, and of being very much at ease with ourselves and with life. Transiting Saturn is moving through Pisces at this time, but it makes very little impact on this chart at all. However, transiting Uranus, moving through the final degrees of Taurus, has definitely been stirring up change. Uranus formed an initial square aspect with JD's Venus in Leo, probably somewhere around May of 2024. And because, of course, that natal Venus is in square with natal Mars, Uranus could well have been in orb of an opposition to Mars at that time too. Contacts from Uranus usually need to be in quite close orb before the energy is manifested. And Uranus will station direct at the end of January 2025. At this point it will be at 23 degrees and 16 of Taurus, so may well be out of orb by then of an opposition to that Mars, but is certainly still going to make another contact with that Venus. We know that Uranus energy is highly unpredictable, often unstable, and very much orientated towards freedom, rebellion, excitement, and this square with the natal Venus may well bring about disruption of existing friendships and relationships. There could be shake-ups to our peer group, and we could strike up new relationships which bring big changes to our friendship circles or our intimate relationships, and potentially also to our value system. One of the problems with these disruptions to our relationships is that these relationships will not necessarily stand the test of time. So here we can see another transit which could be disruptive and bring change, but not necessarily stability or longevity. We can also see that JD is coming to the end of another ongoing generational transit, and this is where Pluto has been square to its natal position. Pluto will certainly move away from this point by the end of 2024, but even around election time, that square is still very much in orb. Pluto is concerned with regeneration. It transforms, it may destruct the old in order to regenerate and build afresh. There can sometimes be a power dynamic if the people around us try to prevent these changes taking place. It doesn't have to be experienced as an entirely negative transit, but it certainly does bring change. Now, what I am seeing so far are not the kind of transits that we would associate with the big win, the big step up in life, the opening up of a successful new chapter. But transits aren't the only way of identifying major life shifts. Although we don't know the exact birth time, we can look at some of the progressions to see whether they would be in a degree or so of making important inter-aspects. If we look at this chart, we can see that the progressions are placed around the outside of the chart in green. These progressions have all been calculated for the 5th of November, for election day. And when we look at progressions, we are moving one day forward in our ephemeris for every year of life. JD will be 40 at around the time of the election, and so we are looking at the ephemeris positions 40 days after JD was born. And what is surprising me is that we have nothing significant to show. We have no major aspects being formed in the progressions. There are no imminent sign changes. I can see that something interesting happened last year in 2023 at some point, and this involves that Neptune, because when JD was born, we can see that Neptune was in retrograde motion. However, progressed Neptune has now changed direction and is moving direct. This is always very important. And so when did that happen? Well, Neptune turned direct on the 39th day after JD was born, and so it correlates with his 39th year of life, and that is indeed a time when JD first became a United States Senator. So this is a sea change in our life. But other than that, there is very little action in the personal progressed planets, and that surprises me. Again, can I ask that if anyone is aware of the birth time Could they pass it on to me, please? If I could progress the ascendant and the midheaven, it would give me so much more information to work with. We can also look at the solar arc planets. These are the planets that are placed around the outside of the chart in blue. And when we look at solar arcs, we are moving all the planets in the chart forward for every 1 year of life. So even the slow-moving outer planets will move forward by a degree, and the interplay between them and the birth chart will give us some very interesting information about events. What does this tell us? Well, bizarrely, this cupboard is empty too. The most that we can pick up is that solar arc Pluto is beginning to move away from a 90-degree aspect with Mercury. This may be still in orb, and it could coincide with an event where JD's mind has been opened up to new ideas, to more profound thinking. Great weight will have become attached to communications, our verbal interactions, our writing, and we could also learn something new under this kind of contact, and it would have a far-reaching and transformative impact on our beliefs. Sometimes Pluto brings in a power dynamic, so we can't rule out forcing others to come around to our way of thinking, or vice versa. I have to say that overall I am a bit stumped by the lack of any activity across these multiple methods. Let's have a quick look at the relationship between JD and Trump and see if this is one that would stand the test of time. And so on the left we have a Synastry chart which has JD's noon chart in the centre and Trump's planets arranged around the outside in red. This is a very quick look, so we'll concentrate on conjunctions or things that are very striking. Here we can see that Trump's Mars is conjunct with JD's Venus, and that Venus is on Trump's ascendant too. So each party is very energised by the other. There is probably this mutual admiration for different reasons, and Trump's Pluto too is directly on JD's Sun. So there is an intense fascination here with each other and an attraction to each other's company, undoubtedly. There could be a power dynamic involved at times, with each party playing a role in this. Trump's Jupiter could potentially be around the area of JD's moon, but we just can't be certain because of the lack of a birth time. I do initially find it a little concerning that their Mars positions are in square aspect with each other. This does bring a lot of conflicting and challenging energy into their relationship, so we could often see conflict, arguing, challenges and friction between their respective egos. But the composite chart will give us a clearer idea of how these energies will be managed. The composite chart is a blending of the two individual charts, and it shows us what the relationship will be like, as if the relationship was a separate entity with a life and a dynamic of its own. This is quite a strong chart, as you can see. Please bear in mind that we cannot consider house placements here because of the lack of birth time. If we hone in on that Mars, we can see that there is a square to the sun of the relationship. And so no matter how gregarious and positive this relationship looks when this pair are in the public arena, or what we are fed through the media, we do have to remember that underlying the relationship there will be conflicts which need to be managed. Dispute, dissent and ego challenge are part of this dynamic. But there are very many positive qualities to coexist with this. The Sun in Cancer hints that there is an emotional facet to this relationship, aside from it being a working one. There is that mutual emotional commitment and a feeling of emotional safety for both of them. We also have these near exact sextiles between Venus and Mars, and also between the Sun and Saturn, that tell us that this relationship could well be a very stable and satisfying one. As far as working relationships go, this one does look like one that will bring mutual growth, stimulation, and be robust enough to accommodate change and new ideas and inspiration. Uranus, Pluto, and Saturn all together could be a pressure cooker in some relationships, but I think they're well integrated in this chart, and in my opinion, I think this bodes well for a working relationship which intends to introduce sweeping societal reforms. It does not tell us that this pair will be successful at the election, but it does show us that these people would be able to successfully work together on these issues. Do you feel any the wiser after watching that? I find it quite bizarre that there is so little happening in JD's chart in terms of impending success or promotion. But again, if any of you are aware of a birth time, that would really be appreciated. Thank you. I have already started recording my next video, and so it will be with you within a couple of days. We'll be looking at Kamala Harris, stepping back in time, examining the converse measurements and seeing what's there. Do take care and God bless.